Hey guys, Josh Olfert back with another video, and today we're going to talk about the most regrettable financial decisions that I have ever made. If there's any time to think less like an investor, it is this time right now. So if you had known who I was 5 years ago, it's a very different picture than who I am now. Now I am running a financial services firm on a day-to-day basis, and I have clients who kind of expect that I'm doing the correct things with my money. They expect that, I'm supposed to be the example of what good financial decision making is, but it certainly wasn't always that way. Today, I'm mostly interested in finding ways that I can increase my well-being over time. Priority number one in terms of my finances is how can we put our money in productive places? How can we put our money in places where one day it might afford us the opportunity where we don't necessarily have to work? If you had hung out with me 3 or 4 years ago, you might see a very different picture than that. You might see somebody who was starting out their business. This is kind of where I was starting my own business, and you find yourself in a position where it's difficult, it's hard. Starting to invest and starting your own business is a difficult thing because you kind of see the success of other people around you, and you see the success that people are having that isn't even real, like the stuff that you're seeing online. And you kind of want to keep up with that. There's a certain part of your ego or your persona who wants to be seen as someone who was already successful before you've put in the necessary work to do that. And I think that some of the worst financial decisions I made in my life were because of that need or that hope for validation. I think that when you are trying to keep up, put out the illusion that you already are something that you were aspiring to be, but that you are not yet, it can lead to a ton of terrible financial decisions. One of the things people tell you is that you should surround yourself with people who are in a better position than you. If you want to be wealthier, you should surround yourself with people who are wealthier than you. If you want to be more fit, you should surround yourself with people who spend more time in the gym with you. What people don't really tell you about in that idea is that it's actually much harder. If you want to be better, you should surround yourself with people who are better than you. But if you want to have an easy flowing, happy state, you should probably surround yourself with people who are worse than you, because that can always make you feel as if you're on top or as if you're victorious for some reason. Surrounding yourself with people who are in a higher position than you is uncomfortable. That's by definition what it is. When you're surrounding yourself with people who are above you, you're in a position where you're trying to always match their level. You're trying to, elevate who you are as a person to meet, I guess, the requirements of the people around you. And I think some of the worst financial decisions I made in my life were directly tied to this idea that I was making that sacrifice. I wanted to surround myself with people who were better than me. I wanted to surround myself with great business owners and fantastic entrepreneurs and people who knew how to sell. And for me, those were things I wanted to be better at. But they could afford things I couldn't, and they could do things that I couldn't. And maybe it was bad because they could afford things that I could just barely afford. And what that meant is that I was always kind of stretching myself to keep up with what they were doing. All you're doing is constantly making purchases, not because you're enjoying them or because you get some gratification out of it, but you're doing it because you're seeking the approval of the people you respect. And I think that some of the worst financial decisions you make are when you find yourself in that state. For instance, for me, I remember I was in a state where I was starting my business. Things were going well, I was happy, I was making progress, but I was around people, like I said, who were doing so much better and who were accelerating at a much higher rate. And we were young, we were 18, 19, 20 years old, and I found myself around people who started buying really nice cars. It was cool to have the newest BMW. It was cool to buy a 2-seater sports car that almost proved as if what you were doing was working. And what I was doing was kind of working, but it wasn't luxury sports car worthy. I found myself buying a BMW that was a few years old just to kind of keep up with the people around me, because I felt in that moment insufficient. I felt like there was something I had to prove. I went and I bought this used BMW that was just horrible. I mean, like, it was nice, and everybody who, I got the dopamine hits when I bought it, and everyone's like, oh, that's great, your business must be doing fantastic, you must be doing awesome. And, I felt great because in that moment, it was as if that decision was paying off the way I had expected. It was providing that validation I wanted. Then you own the car for a year, and what tends to happen is a used luxury car breaks down. I found myself stretching to afford something. And then after a year, it just got worse and worse and worse, and the problems began to accumulate. I remember there was a stretch of time where on top of all the regular car payments, like the financing payment, because I didn't buy it cash, on top of the insurance costs and the gasoline and all that stuff, I was paying $800 to get things fixed. And the next month, something would come up and I'd pay $500 to get that fixed. And I found myself in a position where the thing that I was trying to use to make me look rich was actually making me less rich, which is like the stupidest thing I could possibly imagine. You have set this intention that it's gonna do something and it's doing the complete opposite. That was a financial decision where I ended up having to sell that car for less than the loan on it. I had negative equity in the car, which means I had to roll that over to something new. You know, the financing rate I paid was too much. I was paying for fixes, and I look back on that experience and, you know, I don't hold a grudge on it. I don't think as it was some devastating thing that ruined my life, but I look back on that and just think, man, that was a horrible financial decision. If I'm honest, it was a small price to pay for a lesson that's gonna pay dividends forever. Because what I learned through that experience is that there's always a bigger fish, you know? You can stretch yourself to try to buy something that's gonna put you in a higher position socially. The person you're looking up to is looking up to someone else. They're not looking up to you. They're not looking down and seeing, you know, if you're keeping up. They're looking up and seeing who are they competing with. And the person they're trying to compete with is trying to compete with someone else. And it goes all the way up to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, where people are wishing they were them. And, you know, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett wish they were kids again. So it's in this loop where we kind of all want what someone else has. And yeah, that's probably as far as I can go on that topic. When we go through life, there's certain people who are saying things, but you have to be ready to receive it. And I came across somebody named Naval Ravikant, and he changed the way I thought about everything relating to wealth, because I was in a position where I had just been hurt. I had been psychologically distraught and financially hurt by going out and trying to compete for status, because that's what I thought wealth was. I had mixed wealth and status as two separate things. Naval Ravikant shared this incredible idea, and he said, you know, most people misunderstand that there's three things that people associate together but are completely separate, and they're wealth, money, and status. Your social status, your standing in the social hierarchy, you know, where you are, what kind of things you own, what signaling items, do you have a nice car, do you have a nice watch, is your house big? It has actually nothing to do with wealth, because what wealth is when you have some sort of edge, you have some sort of asset, you have some sort of talent or ability or investment that produces for you so that you don't have to produce for yourself. That's what wealth is. It's income generating assets or a portfolio of things like that. At the end of the day, your status and your ability to create wealth are actually at complete odds, because the more you spend on signaling and status items, the less you have to actually invest. So as much as people think those things are kind of the same, and, you know, wealthy people choose to be high status and high status people are wealthy, there's actually no real connection there. My experience as an advisor, some of the wealthiest clients we've come across are the people who drive up in cars that almost signal reverse status. It almost makes them look as if they have no status. And that's something I've always found interesting, is that the people who don't need the validation are often the ones who are the wealthiest. The wealthiest people don't need the validation from others because they're so secure in themselves and they're so secure in their business or their venture or what they've done that they don't feel as if they have to prove it. And lastly, money is simply just how you transfer goods and services. You know, money has very little to do with wealth. Money is just social credits. What it means is that you provided value over here somewhere, you went to work, you did your job, and somebody owes you for that. Society owes you because you did something of value. This advice and this thing that I learned from Naval allowed me to have a much better view of what I should be pursuing. Status is a meaningless chase. It's a zero-sum game. It doesn't make it better for everybody. But if I'm more focused on wealth, how can I create a business that actually provides value to people? How can I create a portfolio that allows me to choose to work instead of being forced to work? These are more of my priorities now, as opposed to trying to signal or trying to pretend as if I'm doing much better than I actually am. So all in all, guys, we're all going to make bad financial decisions. We just want to focus on those not becoming terrible financial habits that we do repeatedly over and over again. We want to build good habits, like smashing that like button. At least you get entertainment, you get to laugh. Okay, God, please forgive me. I hope that gets better.